Welcome back, and it's that time for Candid Conversations with Tess. And in studio, we are joined by none other than Anne Agimba, who is an advocate of the High Court. And we are talking about LGBTQ and the family. We are all familiar with the uproar that has come up as a result of the Supreme Court ruling last week that gave the LGBTQ community the right to associate. So welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much, Tess, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, Karibu. Let's start with the controversial topic of the law of association. As far as we know, the LGBTQ community is illegal. What does it mean when the Supreme Court rules and says that they have a right to associate? Help us understand these legal terms.
Well, I think the hot topic of today is really Article 36. Of the Constitution, which forms part of the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is basically the articles that cover the freedom of every Kenyan. So when Article 36 is mentioned, it's really about the right to association in terms of being allowed to form any grouping that you want and not being discriminated upon because of age, because of sex, because of orientation, or whatever it is that you want to form the group for, you should be allowed. That's what Article 36 is about. So according to the court, essentially what was saying is that when they looked at the definition that was given as to whether the LGBTQ association should be formed by the non-governmental organization or board, it was said that it was because of the name, the LGBTQ name, that it was being denied. However, the purpose of the proponents of this association wanted to do so to protect the discrimination against lesbians and gays in the society. So the thing that has brought in a controversy is whether the name should be allowed, and that's what it is the NGO board was dissenting against, and because it evokes the aspect of lesbianism, which as Kenyans we're against. But the fact that they're discriminated upon is a point we can all agree. We do see gays being beaten up on the street. There's a certain hate speech against them. So the court was caught up between a quandary of what's in a name. And this is that kind of case, what's in a name. Thank you.
So when we talk about they are being discriminated against, according to the Constitution, gays are illegal. Is that true or false? Let's understand this first.
Not gays are illegal. What it is we do have people of sexual orientation that our society does not accept. The act of homosexuality is what is illegal.
Okay.
So, but the people themselves who profess to be gay or lesbians, we do not recognize them as being correct in our society.
Does it mean that the Constitution has not clearly defined who they are in terms of the society and what their place is, such that now they're trying to find a place to place them?
Well, what happens is, in this particular case, what's really the quandary is the Constitution does not necessarily really define their sexual orientation. Okay, we do agree that there are people who have, say, intersex people, and even in the Children's Act, there are intersex children who are recognized. So we do recognize that there are such kind of people, but we do not allow the act of homosexuality. That is what it is. That is a quandary.
Isn't it a contradiction in itself?
It is a contradiction, and that's why there's an uproar, because as a society we do not approve of that act, so we should not recognize that they should form the association. You see, in normal parlance, from a legal standpoint, is you normally form if you formed an airline, you'd imagine that if you're forming an airline, it is for the purpose of, flying planes. So in this case, if you have an LGBTQ association, it goes to say that it should be to promote the actions of LGBTQ. But in this case, the proponents of the of the ones who wanted to have this formed is to protect the LGBTQ rights against discrimination. So that's where it is. It's a little bit of a English misnomer, or how we talk about description.
But it seems like a slippery slope in this regard. CITAM presiding Bishop Callisto Odede said that if we allow them to associate as the gay community, what excludes thieves, for example, or bandits, saying we also have a right to associate because we are people?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Tess. It is a slippery slope, and as Kenyans being a very religious society, both Islam and Christian, which are the major religions, even Hinduism, all those religions do not advocate for homosexuality, and it is a slippery slope because immediately they have an organization, then it means they can, press their elbows and ask for more and more and more rights. And perhaps because this has been a battle of about 10 years, it has been a battle since 2012. That's the first time that the matter came into court, and up to this winning. And that's why it is pretty frightening, because immediately that happens, it does open doors for greater negotiations for other purposes.
I'm reminded that the Constitution is based on the Word of God, largely. Then how come this deviation is being allowed by the same judges who we see as many people being sworn into office through the Bible? And it's that same Bible that is telling us that, in the Old Testament, homosexuals were actually to be stoned. Right. Thank God for grace today. But I think we're almost like stretching it to a Sodom and Gomorrah kind of thing. So in your opinion, in terms of how come the Bible in this regard has been disregarded, yet it is the foundation for which we have based our Constitution?
Well, the truth of the matter is this ruling does raise a lot of controversy, and is also against many of the things that that within our Constitution that are against homosexuality. Say, for example, the Penal Code. The Penal Code in several acts does talk about homosexuality being a crime. So I feel that the good judges did get caught up in the definitions, and should have looked at the totality of the meaning of what it is that they were trying to pass, rather than just stick on to the purpose, because they just stuck to the purpose. They should have looked at the totality and seen how it's going to affect our society, which I must say we are really in an uproar. Yes, in a negative way.
Yeah, actually, the president, William Ruto, today spoke regarding Deputy President Rigiji termed it as a satanic act. We also have our opposition leader, Raila Odinga, who has also condemned in the strongest terms, saying that this is not what we stand for as a community. But going forward, what channels should be used in terms of overturning or reversing the law? Is it even possible?
What is going on right now is that the feeling is that this is not necessarily even a matter that should have been adjudicated by the Supreme Court. It is really about a change of society, and so perhaps this is one of the conversations and questions that should be thrown back to the Kenyan people for a referendum, to give their suggestions and to vote whether or not we should recognize LGBTQs in our society or not. And it's not for the Supreme Court, because it would fundamentally change the way we do our things. It would fundamentally change the penal code. It would fundamentally change how we would associate, or even the things that we allow or disallow. I mean, of late there's been the uproar about books in school children, books for school children, having the LGBTQ intonations, or even the media, the media, and each program having an LGBTQ person. So in our society, we do shun that. So it would actually affect so many laws affecting us as Kenyans. So perhaps this is something that should be taken on for a referendum.
Speaking of our family, help us understand, how does the Constitution define the family as?
In the Constitution, that should be in Chapter 4 of the Constitution. The family is defined as people of the opposite sex getting married voluntarily. And there are several other definitions in that, but that's the central thing. So within our Constitution itself, we don't recognize people of the same sex getting married. The Constitution is very, very specific that it is two people of the opposite sex, not many people, two people of the opposite sex who get married voluntarily.
Okay, so then where does this ruling place, you know, if you give them the right to associate, that means they are allowed to marry, for example, or that's the road that we are headed to. In case people kept quiet, then that would mean we change even the definition of family.
Absolutely. So it goes down right to what it is that we define as family in our society, and how that would, if we see family as father, mother, and children, then does it mean two fathers and children, or two mothers and children? So it is a slippery slope. And we are getting a lot of pressure, of course, from the West. And perhaps there was an inclination to want to seem modern, as modern as the West, and pressures coming in for us to try and see if we can navigate this space to advance maybe other interests in the country.
Speaking of the West, we've heard that there have been pressures from the West for developing nations to accept such laws or to pass such laws so that they can get donor funding, they can get grants. Do you think that Kenya should succumb to such devices, even though we are in debt to our neck? Yeah.
Well, I think it's important as Kenyans for us to define our own social values and our own cultural values, and more so we are a Christian country, largely Christian, and so do the Muslims and the Hindus, and also the other minor religions define who we are. Even when it comes to defining how marriage is recognized, it is the other religions that define how marriages are recognized. It is not sexual orientation that defines what marriage is like. As a result of that, I think we need to be careful on what it is that we define as a country, or allowing too much influence, because there can be an upheaval in society.
Maybe let's just get back to that impact of this ruling to the family unit. What do you see from a legal perspective, from a Christian perspective? What's the impact to this, to our families? Tess,
the arguments for and against, homosexuality and lesbianism. Are people born that way, or is it peer pressure, or what exactly is the case? If you listen to what many Kenyans said as they were being interviewed, you realize a huge bend by the younger society, a younger generation, being more accommodative. More accommodative and not seeing what the big deal is, and looking at it as more of a personalized issue, that if I'm not gay and somebody else is, that's really their own issue. Society is about change, and change sometimes is inevitable. So perhaps the question again would be to throw it back to as a referendum and say, as a Kenyan society, how do we see family evolving? What is it of us who think persons within our families have other orientation? How do we take them? Should we criminalize them? And it is a slippery slope, and that's why perhaps the judges were inclined to accept for the protection against violence or discrimination for them, because there's really no space in the society that actually advocates for their safety. So we may wish to ignore it, and we may say that we are a religious society, but there are some realities that how then are these people protected?
Would you say that we are, as Christians or as Kenyans, we are too hostile to the gay community? Perhaps, I'm not saying that it should be allowed, but I'm just saying the way you're putting it in a way that they could be murdered, or they could be mugged or stoned at any moment. So where do we draw the line between protecting people who do not want to adhere to the ways of the Constitution and the Bible for which it is based on, and also being human?
I guess, Tess, that's a quandary we are all in. When people are a minority, they're really a minority. And it means that because you're a minority, you're discriminated, against. If, as a Kenyan woman, if you had a beard, would treat you in a different way. If you had a big beard, but in other parts of Africa, it's considered admirable. But in Kenya, with a woman with a huge beard, we would look at you in a different way and would treat you differently. And perhaps then you would form a society for women with beards, just on a light note. And so because are you a woman or are you not a woman, and does a woman have a beard, right? So in that case, I think we should be sensitive enough, and perhaps as a society also see, then we do agree that they're discriminated upon. So perhaps what avenue do we then create that will also ensure their rights as people and as Kenyans and our fellow brothers and sisters, that they are protected against any violence or discrimination of any sort?
When I think about it, I remember a clip I just today watched, and it was talking about transgender, transracial, and now there is trans-abled. Can you believe, in terms of, there is someone who believes that they should have been born disabled. So now they cut off their hand because they feel like they should have been born disabled. Someone else changes their melanin color to black because they feel like they should have been born that way. So I feel like Kenya is going in the direction of saying no now, because if we do not say no now, these are the things that are on the way. They're just, it's almost like a gate. Once you open one, it's like we don't know how to control it. So that is where now we are trying to define family. We're trying to define it in the constraints of the Constitution, because not just the Constitution, but the Bible, because if we allow all these other things, it looks like there is no end. It's almost like there is no end. So maybe tell us, in terms of our children, children are growing up in this environment. What do you think? We watch movies and series that advocate these things, and probably that is where we actually should have started. Do you think that we need to protect children from such things at an early age?
Well, the Children's Act does legislate that the parent is in charge of, the child's social and moral upbringing. And so the parent does have a duty to protect their children against anything that they consider immoral, right? So, Tess, this topic is not going to go away. It doesn't matter as Kenyans if we wish it away or we say we hate it. The question is really, where will society push us to? And then how do we then navigate those narrow spaces that we are in? And maybe it is in a time like this that we'll have to make our decisions.
Please help us understand the rights of children. Sometimes children grow up in society and we just grow in terms of discipline, in terms of guidance, aside even from these tendencies. Generally, according to the law, what is a child entitled to?
Well, first of all, let's define a child as being a person who's under the age of 18. And a child is, under the Children's Act, is entitled to so many rights. They have, and under the Constitution, so many rights. The right to food, to the basic attributes of life, a right to not be discriminated upon for whatever reason, even from unborn mothers. There's actually, the Act is actually specific. Even by how you were born, you have a right not to be discriminated upon. So the children have many rights so that they can be able to grow up to be normal human beings. So a right to have a safe environment, a right to be looked after. And that's why you cannot leave your child below a certain age alone. And because we do have a Children's Protection Act where the child will be taken care of by the society if you're unable to do so. So there are many, many rights. The right to education, the right to association, to have friends, and to grow up in a healthy environment. So that even you, the parent, if you're not able to provide a healthy environment for the child because you lack food, you don't have a job, or it's a violent environment, or it's a dysfunction of a family where the parents are always fighting. Society has a right to protect those children.
Okay, even as we come to a conclusion, I'm reminded that yesterday in Parliament, when the legislators were legislating, some of them brought up the issue of indicting the Supreme Court judges because of bringing up such a law that is anti the society. Is there a possibility of those judges or the Supreme Court being indicted because of such a ruling?
That would be unfortunate. And the reason is we do look up to our judges for their judgment, right? And they should not then be punished because they thought something different. I think that would be very backward. People don't always say the things that you wish to hear. And judges are there to change our society because they're answering to needs in our society. Again, I think it's important for us to remember that the judges did say that they were not, they did not advocate for the changing of the penal code or advocate for the homosexuality as the act. What it is that they were giving a right to for the proponents of the NGO was the right to form an NGO in that name. It was in that name to enable these LGBTQ people be protected from discrimination. That was the bend of it. So it's been twisted a little bit, but it's twisted anyway. There's a way. It's been twisted right through. So, anyway, you know, it's a little bit about, you know, yeah.
So way forward, even as we conclude, what's the way forward in terms of this ruling? It's already been done. Is it a done deal? Or what are the ways that the country can go? Because everyone is talking about it, but until it's put down on paper and things start moving in terms of legislation, is it even right in terms of the parliament said that that is the work of the parliament to legislate such laws? So tell us going forward what to do.
So going forward, what has really been advocated for is a referendum. And the question again thrown back to the society. And so that Kenyans can say, should we or should we not? And the reason is because it's gone to the highest court, the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is the end of that kind of conversation. So if it's going to take another stand, then it calls for maybe, you know, several millions of signatures for us to revisit this issue and ask for this particular law to be examined. One of the MPs has said they want to go to court to have a review of the ruling. So it is the hottest topic in the country right now. So perhaps it will also give us a new precedent of how things should go. So
in terms of a referendum, tell us a few details of how that will go down for things to change.
It would mean that somebody proposes a certain motion, say for example, of a review or they advocate the acceptance or non-acceptance of certain LGBTQ rights or not. And so with that, there are many signatures that are given, and then that's taken to Parliament for debate, and then it's put forth for the countries to for the citizens to vote.
So what's the role of the Kenyan in this regard?
In that regard, the Kenyan would vote for or against. Remember how we voted for or against in the last referendums that we're having? So it would form that route of the referendum. So it would be a thing that the people who are for and against would campaign for or against the advocating of the LGBTQ rights, whether recognized or not recognized. So it would be something that I would imagine if it happened, it would be progressive in terms of a society, of examining what do we actually feel and how do we want actually our society to move forward. It would be progressive. I would advocate for something like that. It would be wonderful.
Okay.
Would change the world.
Yeah. You know, I'm reminded when you speak of referendum, we go back to
the politics.
To the politics, and it makes me wonder in terms of, are we going to change all, you remember all those changes that people have been envisioning for the Constitution? Is this perhaps a moment that Kenyans should take as probably, if we choose to go the referendum way, we can be able to change all the other laws that we feel that should not need to be changed or need to be amended? Is it something that you will recommend?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend that. Perhaps on this one, it would be the first time that we'd having a social a matter on social for a referendum. That would be progressive. So, but not for all of them. We're pretty happy with the Constitution, which we're all happy with what it is that we did. But perhaps this one, it's a time for re-examination.
Okay, your parting shot?
My parting shot is that as Kenyans, I think we need to to stand firm about what our values are, and to also take an active stand in terms of being able to protect the people who are minorities in society. So it's a little bit of an oxymoron, but I think it's important that as Kenyans, we all have a right to fully live our lives to the best of our ability. Thank you.
There you have it.